Welcome back to Taiwan Outlook. Joining us today is Mr. Mitchell Tsai. He's the International Liaison of Taiwan Environmental Action Network. Mitchell, we've been talking about the global warming issue in general, and Taiwan apparently is part of the international community. But the thing is, more and more people actually are becoming more aware of the seriousness of the problem. But are there a lot of people really actually involved in the protection of the environment here in Taiwan?
There are a lot of young people being involved in environmental protection in Taiwan. And in fact, that was one of the things that surprised me, actually, was that I came here 2 years ago studying Chinese after I graduated college, and I had been involved in environmental groups, but I never imagined to come out here and find exactly the same thing. And in fact, I think one of the interesting parts is that in the U.S., we're concerned about, the environmental groups are concerned about our consumption. But when I came to Taiwan, what I realized was that production was even a more serious issue, and because let me put it this way, I was really inspired when I came out here by the Taiwanese environmental movement, because here in Taiwan it's really a lot about impact the environment on people's lives, on people's health, and on people's well-being. In the U.S., oftentimes people think of the environment as a sort of far-off idea, because if you're well off in the United States, you never see it. You never get. But in Taiwan, it's a problem that it's such a small country, and it's a problem that affects everyone in a lot of ways. Yes.
Yeah. But let's look at the role of the government in Taiwan and how does it do in recent years in promoting the idea of environmental protection. Do you think the government in Taiwan has done enough in recent years?
Any environmentalist will always tell you that, of course, they've taken some steps, but they could always do more, and we always think that it's not enough, So,
what do you think are most important steps taken by the government in Taiwan?
Well, making more public transportation available in the cities has been a good positive step. Encouraging environmental education out here in Taiwan. They've taken a lot of steps to increase Taiwanese awareness about CO2 and also just about the impact of their lifestyles on the environment. For example, the EPA recently placed out regulations that stated that you could no longer use plastic cups. You had to use cups like these in government offices and schools, and that makes a big difference, because it means that the government's stepping out and trying to set an example for people. So I certainly think that that Taiwanese government has taken certain positive steps, but a lot of ways I think that the problem is that when we talk about small personal consumption things, the government has been able to take a lot of make good policy. But when it comes to the economy, they still haven't been able to encourage positive, sustainable development.
That's right.
And for example, there's a debate currently over whether to build more freeways, or as opposed to whether to build more rails. And I think when you evaluate transportation policy in Taiwan, you can see it mixed. Like, Taiwan has taken great steps in, for example, building a high-speed rail, something that the U.S. doesn't even do, and that has a significant impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions from airplanes. We're talking about consuming oil. It also reduces economic costs for people for being able to move around the island, in a timely manner. But at the same time, we talk about we're also considering building more freeways here in Taiwan. And our kind of thinking, the environmental movement, our sort of thinking towards what Taiwan should do is the Taiwanese government needs to take steps in terms of developing infrastructure that will be efficient in 20 years. And if you look at the projections regarding oil prices, whether you take seriously that CO2 international regime on CO2 will become more and more stronger, and more international efforts will be taken towards CO2. You have to focus on developing an economy and infrastructure that can compete in that economy. And so, for example, in our view, building more freeways built in Taiwan would not go towards that direction.
Yeah. Well, one interesting thing you point out earlier is that one big difference between Taiwan and the U.S. is that the U.S. seems to be, environmental groups seems to be more focused on the so-called consumption part, and Taiwan is more interested in the so-called production part. But apparently, even now in Taiwan, we still have a lot of industry, consuming a lot of energies, heavy industries and so on. What can we do to solve the problem? It's very difficult to shift this kind of heavy consuming industries in Taiwan out of Taiwan, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that the Taiwanese economy itself has been getting gradually cleaner over the past 10 years as education levels have skyrocketed. So you see a lot more commercial industry and you see a lot more high-tech industry, for example. But at the same time, the Taiwanese government, in terms of increasing its energy, has actually been shifting more towards coal, more towards oil, and more towards dirty energy sources. And I think what can I say? In addition to that, one particular statistic that I found interesting, it's from this NGO called the Taiwan Environmental Protection Union. They came out with statistics that said petrochemicals and heavy manufacturing, which only accounts for less than 5% of Taiwan's total GDP, or less than 2%. A very small percentage accounts for nearly 30% of Taiwan's CO2 emissions. So a very large percentage of our CO2 emissions are coming from sort of antiquated industries that have been just getting smaller and smaller here in Taiwan.
But another controversial issue in Taiwan is about nuclear power.
Yes.
Some people that think that, yes, we don't want to use coal, oil, and so on, but how about nuclear power? It might be more environmentally, clean in terms of using nuclear power. What's your take on that?
Well, that's when you look. That's one of the big issues is with putting consumption and production together. For example, when you want to build these power these nuclear power plants, you have to mine uranium, and actually uranium mining is environmental impacts are absolutely horrible. And so even as you can say that you reduce CO2 at one end, you're not necessarily reducing total CO2. So we don't see it as a good final solution. And also, in fact, one of the things that the environmental movement here in Taiwan is pushing for is more local sources. Is that we want Taiwan has great resources in terms of solar energy, in terms of geothermal energy. And you can see that a lot of companies have been banking on trying to develop these kinds of industries. In fact, Taiwan is also one of the world's largest producers in terms of solar panels.
That's right.
That's one of the things that they're pushing for. And so and in fact, I once read a report that said that from the NRDC, Natural Resources Defense Council, which is a U.S. NGO, and what they're doing is they're doing consulting with Taidian, which is the Taipower, the Taiwanese power company. And what they said is that for every $1 that Taipower would spend on developing domestic energy sources, rather than importing nuclear technology, rather than importing coal, they would oil. They would generate $3 worth of economic activity. So, what our thinking is that Taiwan needs to become energy independent or petroleum independent. We don't want Taiwan to be dependent on petroleum or coal sources, and we feel that by really committing to developing local domestic renewable energy, not only would we would not only be able to address global warming, we'd be able to improve the economy as well.
Do you think our government is receptive to those kinds of ideas?
They're taking steps slowly, but as always, we'll always say too slow.
But how about the civil society in Taiwan? Do you think that the general public now are more receptive to those ideas of renewable energies?
I think that they're becoming much more aware of this issue, because global warming in this year has become a big media item, and a lot more people are becoming aware of this issue. But in terms of the possibilities of renewable energy, or the possibilities of Taiwan becoming a leader in renewable energy, I don't think people have necessarily a lot of civil society people haven't necessarily don't necessarily understand the idea yet.
But I think our government has been saying that the cost or the cost for the energy in Taiwan, the price for the power, water, and even gas in Taiwan is very cheap in comparison with other countries. So maybe it's a good idea now to raise the price and try to discourage people from using more gases and power and so on. Do you think that's the good idea?
I think that part of the big issue is that oil and gas and water all these natural resources are much cheaper than they actually are in reality.
That's
right. The government purposely makes it, and so obviously encouraging conservation would do us a lot. But the big problem is that the Taiwanese government actually has been very active in addressing personal consumption, personal consumer consumption. But they haven't. But nearly 60% of greenhouse gas emissions comes from industry in Taiwan.
Yeah.
And in fact, the vast majority of those greenhouse gases come from dirty, outmoded industries. And at the same time, like the Taiwanese government is currently actually considering these projects that would, including building a petrochemical plant, including building more of these more petrochemical oil-related industries here in Taiwan, that would, over the next 10 years, increase Taiwan's CO2 output by nearly 40%. If they just approve these 2 or 3 projects that are on the table right now. And so our thinking is that we're not talking about shutting down the current. We think that yes, oil prices definitely are in reality much too low. We do think that energy prices are much too low. But more importantly, we think that we need to take steps in the future, is that we need to move our economy towards a sustainable direction.
Do you think that NGOs, in terms of environmental protections, are booming now in Taiwan? They cover all kinds of issues, and they've been doing all kinds of coordinated efforts in addressing the issue.
I think that in Taiwan, we have seen a blossoming of NGOs and citizens groups over the past 10, 15 years because of Taiwan's democratic revolution and because of higher education levels here in Taiwan nowadays. People are taking more responsibility for their own society, and they're taking responsibility to come out and try to voice their views. And I think Taiwanese NGOs it's still developing. Like the NGOs we're still very small, we're still very underfunded, and I mean, even when you compare Taiwanese NGOs to American NGOs or Hong Kong or England, they're still sort of in their infancy, but they're developing rather quickly and becoming more resourceful. Yes.
How about the role of media in environmental protection? Do you think that our media are playing a good role in promoting the ideas of environmental protection?
Well, you have me here, right?
I mean, local media in general.
Local media. Well, local media has been reporting global warming more and more over the past 1 or 2 years. It hasn't. Before then, it wasn't even a non-existent concept. But at the same time, there is still a lot. I still don't think the information is. You can find information on the web. You can find it through other alternate sources. But through mainstream media, I still don't think there's necessarily very much coverage of the issue by itself.
Yeah.
It's a lot of it tends to be sensationalistic. For example, I had some friends who actually came out and they dressed up as polar bears actually, and came out on an ice cube. It created a little bit of a stir a couple of weeks ago, but when they got covered, the media didn't even talk about global warming. They just sort of covered about the silliness of it. Yeah,
that's right. And how about individuals? Do you think, because eventually you had to count on individuals in solving all the problems, right? Not just industries.
Yeah.
Do you think that the consumers or individuals in Taiwan are becoming more concerned about the issue and becoming more responsible in solving the issue?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, with the way energy costs are here, for example, there's a very large price on energy efficiency. A very large premium placed on energy efficiency in terms of purchasing appliances, and people are also making a lot of steps towards improving their own lifestyles. But I think even being raised by my parents, for example, like they're always very. I think Taiwanese in general are more oriented towards not being wasteful in the first place. And so I felt like when I come here, when you say someone is very environmentally friendly out here, the standard is a lot higher than, say, what you would say in the States. Yeah.
And for instance, people are using now those also reusable chopsticks and so on.
Yeah.
And that is quite common in Taiwan, right?
Yeah, it's quite common in Taiwan. I have my own pair as well.
Already?
Yes.
Good. And how about the young students? You said earlier that there are more and more young people involved in this issue.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about their reaction to the global warming issue in Taiwan?
Well, I think that with working with student activists here in Taiwan, or even with young kids, I just noticed that they're increasingly active. They increasingly care more and more about this environmental issue. I think it's just because Taiwan has been developing so quickly over the past couple years, people have the luxury of being able to worry about more things and being more concerned about society. And so I think that young people are more and more active on environmental issues than ever before. Yeah. But it's also awareness as well.
Good.
Yes.
Good. Your organization, Taiwan Environmental Action Network, is a new NGO. It's established only within 2 years.
Yeah.
And when we come back, we'll talk about your agenda and what have you been doing in the past 2 years and what you are hoping to achieve in the future. Okay. And let's take a short break, and we'll be back in a few moments.